Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before I begin the video proper, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for their patience and understanding while I've been away. Obviously, if you've been keeping up with the channel, you should know that my son was born in April, so I've been spending much of my time with him and establishing that very important father-son bond. Spending this time with my newborn son has been incredible, and holding him in my arms and staring into those wondrous eyes is something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. But with that being said, you've clicked on this video to see what I think about Resident Evil Village, and let me just say that it is by far and away the best game I've played this year. The last time I remember enjoying a survival horror game this much was a few years ago with The Evil Within 2, and if you've been here with the channel from the beginning, you'll know that I also made a video on that game expressing why I love it and why it became one of my favorites of all time. I'll leave a link to that video in the description for those who are interested, as well as a link at the top right of the screen directly to the video. Also, just to note, the gameplay you'll be seeing in the background of this video is from a New Game Plus playthrough for Resident Evil Village, so remember that this is not necessarily going to be indicative of what your first playthrough will look like. Resident Evil Village is truly a remarkable game, and while many of the criticisms I've seen are valid, I feel that the game gets more right than it does wrong, and it has easily cemented itself into my list of favorite games of all time, and this is why.
Gifts we gave, but more you took, she snarled. So more in turn is due. In a blink, the girl was trapped inside a mirror.
Resident Evil Village picks up several years after the events of the previous game, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Without spoiling the story of that game, it definitely plays a huge part in your overall enrichment and understanding of the story here in Village, even though you are not required to play Biohazard before jumping into Village. There's even a handy recap video of the events of the previous game for those who wish to catch up without going back and playing RE7, although you would be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't at least try out RE7, because that game is also fantastic in its own right. You once again play as the everyman Ethan Winters, who has now settled down in Europe with his wife Mia and his newborn daughter Rose. However, tragedy strikes as Mia is seemingly shot and killed, and Rose is taken away by series mainstay Chris Redfield, who plays an important secondary role in the story. From there, Ethan awakes on the outskirts of an Eastern European village nestled below a towering mountain range while a foreboding castle looms, casting a pall of darkness over the village. Soon, Ethan finds that the village is overrun with feral creatures called lycans, bearing a strong resemblance to werewolves from popular folklore, and the so-called Four Lords rule over the area with an iron grip, led by the enigmatic Mother Miranda. Ethan's ultimate goal is to dispose of the Four Lords and Mother Miranda, all while trying to rescue his daughter and uncover the mysteries of the village. The narrative in Resident Evil Village really surprised me with its intriguing villains and connections to the wider Resident Evil universe. Without spoiling anything, you'll find by the end of the game that the root of all evil in the Resident Evil series originated here in this village. Ethan as a character is given more depth in this installment as we learn more about why he seems to be able to handle so much punishment. I have to say that as a new father, the story of the game really resonated with me in a way that I wasn't expecting, and it enriched my experience seeing the hellish waters that Ethan has to wade through to save his daughter. It made me ask important questions about myself and how far I would be willing to go to save my own child, something that no other game I've played in recent memory has really made me think about. Once again, it's hard to go into specific detail without giving away some of the game's best moments, but Village absolutely puts the horror in survival horror. You'll be faced with numerous scares, with one section in particular that had me shaking and sweating bullets due to the overwhelming sense of tension and dread. The villains of the game are the most memorable members of the cast, in particular the internet thirst trap Lady Dimitrescu, who chases you down in her castle, much like Mr. X in the Raccoon City Police Department from Resident Evil 2, or even Nemesis from Resident Evil 3. The other antagonists, Donna Beneviento and her doll Angie, Salvatore Moreau, and Carl Heisenberg are also given plenty of personality, with Heisenberg being an oddly comedic standout at times.
Shut your fucking hole! Sorry about that.
Overall, the story in Village doesn't necessarily break new ground, but it admirably captures the essence of the Resident Evil series, with equal amounts emotional drama, terror, and cheese. Resident Evil Village continues the march into new territory for the franchise, as the first-person perspective is maintained from RE7, making Village an intimately terrifying experience. Thankfully, you're given plenty of weapons to defend yourself against the hordes throughout the campaign, and Village certainly takes a far more action-oriented approach than RE7 did, harkening back to the landmark Resident Evil 4, a game whose design and inspiration is still being felt years later, even outside of the Resident Evil franchise. Using a wide variety of firearms, you fight against packs of lichens, zombie-like creatures, gargoyles, cyborgs, and boss enemies that provide interesting mechanics the player has to contend with during their respective battles. Enemy variety was a big complaint from RE7, and Capcom definitely did not disappoint with Village, providing many different obstacles and challenges for the player to overcome. Now, even though you're given a practical armory to use, you still need to be conscientious of how you manage your inventory. Choosing what items to take and what not to take is just as important here as it has been in previous Resident Evil titles. Puzzles, in classic Resident Evil fashion, also play a large part in progressing through each area, and even though they're not as overtly complex as they were in previous games, they still manage to make you stop and think in between the moments where you are fighting to survive. There is also the return of a merchant character in the form of the Duke, who provides color commentary and also upgrades to your weapons, inventory space, and also Ethan himself, as for the first time in the series, you can hunt down local wildlife for meat that the Duke will then prepare in a special dish, which permanently buffs Ethan's base stats like health, movement speed, and how much damage you can absorb by guarding enemy attacks. The progression through the game is constantly rewarding the player, and exploring off the beaten path can yield even greater rewards like money, collectibles, and secret weapons. And this is just the story campaign experience. There is a whole other game mode that adds even more replayability to the game, known as the Mercenaries, a classic staple of the Resident Evil franchise, where you must kill enemies in quick succession in order to build up combo multipliers and reach the highest score possible. Village has been described by many as a greatest hits compilation of the Resident Evil franchise, and while I definitely agree with this sentiment, I believe Village also manages to carve out its own corner in the series as a truly unique gameplay experience. Part of how it manages to do this is through Village's absolutely stellar looping level design. The namesake of this game, the titular Village, acts as the central hub area that you will explore thoroughly and return to periodically from your expeditions to the lands of the Four Lords. The design of the village is very reminiscent of the Souls series, where after going to an area outside of the hub, you always manage to loop back around through shortcuts and secret entrances, making the game world feel large and connected in a way that no other Resident Evil has managed to accomplish, in my opinion. The four areas outside the village, ruled over by the Lords, also provide memorable experiences and looping design of their own. In particular, the first area you explore, Castle Dimitrescu, evokes the same creepy atmosphere of the Spencer Mansion from the original Resident Evil. The dollhouse provides the scariest moments of the entire game and forces the player through brain-teasing puzzles. The reservoir is more linear in nature, but makes for a harrowing endeavor as you avoid a giant mutated animated fish while running along the roofs and floating walkways of a flooded town. Finally, the factory is a multi-level prison of scrap and metal where you must climb to the top, all while fighting cyborg zombies with drills for arms. Artistically, each area is distinct from the next, and the environmental variety on display here really allowed the art department at Capcom to flex their muscles and take us to places we've never been before in a Resident Evil game. It's in sharp contrast to Resident Evil 7, where the game took place in one very small, isolated location. Village, on the other hand, is an odyssey through many visually spectacular and challenging areas that test the player in ways they sometimes might not expect. All of this is buoyed by the power of the proprietary RE engine, which once again wows with technical prowess and grace. This is now the 6th major Capcom title to use the RE engine after Resident Evil 7, Devil May Cry 5, the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, and Monster Hunter Rise. The level of technical wizardry on display with the RE engine rivals even that of the almighty id Tech 7, which powered the fantastic Doom Eternal. There is a level of photorealism in Village that I've yet to see from any other game. Character models are super detailed down to the individual pores of skin. The animation work is superb. The visual aesthetic of the village and each individual area is dripping with detail and environmental storytelling. Performance on the PC is also smooth as butter, as Village ran above 70 to 80 frames per second in 1440p resolution for a large majority of my initial playthrough, with only a few major drops in frame rate here and there. I also just want to say how refreshing it is to see a major AAA release launch in such a well-polished and bug-free state, something that sadly very few game publishers seem to care about nowadays. This is a complete package from day one that runs incredibly well no matter what system you might be playing on, and that is a huge achievement. The score for Village is appropriately haunting, and while it's not super memorable, it does help to set the tone for the player experience. The safe room theme, as always, is the standout, with the main menu theme coming in close alongside it. The music from the game's reveal trailer also makes an appearance during a gameplay segment at the end of the story, which might be my personal favorite piece of music from the soundtrack. Sound design is exceptional. Each enemy hiss and footstep can be heard in the darkness. The booming of bullets fired makes your teeth chatter, and ambient sound like a pack of crows feeding on the dead help to sell you on the more grounded soundscape of the village. Each and every category Capcom has managed to knock out of the park with this game, and it shows in every facet. Resident Evil Village is the best game released in 2021 thus far, and hopefully I've shown you a few of the reasons why I love it and why you should try it out for yourself. Every corner of the game is given attentive care, and the level of quality on display here puts so many other AAA releases to shame. Even if you don't like survival horror titles, you owe it to yourself to experience one of the best games of this year, and what is now one of my favorite games of all time. So these are my overall thoughts on Resident Evil Village, but now I want to know what you think in the comments down below. Have you played Village yet, or do you plan to play it at all? Has this video convinced you to try it out? What are your thoughts and feedback on the game for those of you who have played it? Leave a like on the video, and be sure to also share the video if you enjoyed. Consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this, and be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. And remember that the outsider walks among us. Thanks for watching.